Now that you've passed your J-1 visa interview, it's time to prepare for life in the US. Your first step is deciding where you will live. There are a number of things you can do now to begin your housing search, but we recommend waiting to finalize your housing until after you've arrived in the US. You should plan to stay in a hotel, hostel, or Airbnb when you first arrive so that you can search in person for long-term housing that is comfortable and safe. We know finding housing for your program may seem like a daunting task, but this video will help guide you through the process. Step 1. Do your research. Housing options and prices vary widely across the US, so you will need to research the specific area where your internship will be located and ask yourself some questions. Will you be able to walk or take public transportation to your work location, or will you need to purchase a vehicle? Also, what type of grocery stores, pharmacies, or other amenities are nearby? And most importantly, is the neighborhood safe and will you feel comfortable living there? You also need to know what type of housing is available in your host city. The most common options will likely be an apartment rental or sublet. You'll also need to consider the length of your program and whether you'd like to live alone or with others. Most apartment leases in the US are 12 months, so if you will be in the US for a shorter period of time, or will be in a more expensive city such as New York or San Francisco, securing a short-term stay on Airbnb or subletting a room in a shared apartment may be the most economical option. Subletting is when you take over an apartment lease from a tenant who leaves for a few months or longer. It is a cost-efficient way to live in a furnished apartment in a large city and usually gives you the flexibility of a shorter lease term. If considering a sublet, make sure to ask if the tenants have the legal right to sublet the apartment. When doing this preliminary research, your host employer will be a great resource. Don't be afraid to ask your supervisor for recommendations on local neighborhoods. They'll also be able to tell you the best websites, apps, or other resources people in the area use to find housing. Step 2. Create a budget. Research the cost of living in your US host location to determine what you'll be able to afford between your personal funds and any stipend you will receive from your host employer. You'll need to account for monthly rent, additional utilities, transportation, the cost of food in your area, etc. Don't forget that there will always be initial costs associated with signing a lease. Most landlords will ask for the first month's rent in addition to a refundable security deposit equal to 1 month's rent upon lease signing. You'll also need to factor in the cost of furniture if your apartment isn't furnished. Make sure you have enough money saved for these settling in costs. Step 3. Search for housing. There are a variety of websites to search for housing such as rent.com, roommates.com, Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook, and others listed in our housing guide. But be careful in your search. Housing scams are common. Never send or wire money for an apartment you haven't seen, and ensure you give yourself time to look at properties in person and meet any prospective landlords or roommates. You can even set up appointments before arriving so that you can visit apartments as soon as you get to the US. When you do visit potential rentals, be sure to use the housing checklist on our website to ensure the housing is clean, safe, and comfortable. Finally, don't forget to do a separate search on the landlord and listing to see if anything seems off, and never give out your personal information online, such as credit card numbers or bank information. Only after you've seen the apartment, met your potential roommates, and signed a lease should you pay any money. If you find you have been the victim of a housing scam, report it to the Federal Trade Commission or the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Step 4. Complete a rental application and provide financial details. Once you've decided where to live, you may be asked to submit a rental application as well as financial details such as proof of savings or income while in the US. The landlord may also want to do a credit check. As a J-1 exchange visitor, you probably won't have any US credit history, but there are other ways to show that you will pay rent on time. The landlord may ask that you have a co-signer or guarantor on the lease. This is someone who agrees to support you financially and can show that they have enough funds to pay rent in the event that you are unable to. Step 5. Sign a lease. After the landlord has approved your application, you will need to sign a lease, which is the contract between you and your landlord. If you are subletting a room in a shared apartment, the subletting agreement will often be a lease between you and the original tenant. You should always request a lease, as this protects your right to live in the apartment during the lease term. Read the lease thoroughly to make sure you understand all of the terms before you sign it. Remember, this is a legally binding document. Once it has been signed, it can't be changed. Standard leases typically list the property address, as well as the names of the people that will be living there. It should also include the landlord's name, the length of the lease, the cost of the rent per month, any utilities that will be included in the rent, and details on the deposit and the terms of its return at the end of your lease. Make sure both you and the landlord sign the lease and keep a copy for your records. Step 6. Move in. Congratulations! You've secured housing for your J-1 program. As you prepare for your move-in, read up on renters' rights in your U.S. host state. We also recommend purchasing renter's insurance, which will cover loss or damage of your personal belongings due to fire, theft, vandalism, or other similar events. We know that finding the right housing will ensure you have the best possible stay in the U.S. For more resources and tips, be sure to check out the housing guide on our website. Best of luck in your search.